I'm divorcing you and marrying Ruby." At Oliver's firm declaration, my eyes widened in shock. What? This must be what they mean when they say left speechless. As I stood there in a daze, Ruby spoke in a saccharine voice. "Sophia, I'm sorry. We're in love." I couldn't understand it, but they seemed to be serious. I was so stunned by their desire to have a wedding that I went beyond anger to sheer disbelief. Feeling utterly ridiculous, I decided to leave the house immediately. And a few months later, the day of their wedding finally arrived. I took out my smartphone and tapped the screen. What appeared was a scene from a wedding venue. There stood Ruby in a wedding dress and Oliver in a tuxedo. The two of them were anxiously looking around. They were probably bewildered because no one had shown up. I couldn't help but laugh at the sight. Let them panic all they want. This wedding itself was the stage for my revenge. My name is Sophia Williams, and I'm 52 years old. I've been working in an insurance company's office for a long time. My family consists of my husband Oliver and my son Aaron. Aaron graduated from college this spring and got a job. He's now living alone near his company. Though I felt a bit lonely after finishing raising my child, to be honest, I was relieved. From now on, I thought I'd enjoy my second life. Travel, hobbies, and more. That was the future I was supposed to have. But there was a big problem in our house. That problem was my other family member, Ruby. Ruby is my younger sister by 10 years. For certain reasons, she still lives with us. Being a child born later in our parents' lives, Ruby was spoiled by them. As a result, she's quite selfish. Even now, at 42, that hasn't changed at all. I've been troubled by her actions for years. But I never imagined she'd turn my life upside down to this extent. The whole thing started 18 years ago. Ruby was 24 at the time. I was already married to Oliver and in the middle of raising our child. I was busy and didn't particularly get along with Ruby, so I only saw her occasionally when I visited my parents' house. Though she was selfish as a child, Ruby was now an adult. Surely, she must have become a bit more responsible. However, according to my parents, she hadn't changed at all. She lived at home but didn't do any housework and only complained to our parents. She disliked working and only occasionally did part-time jobs when she felt like it. If it stays like this, I'm worried about Ruby's future. If she starts a family, maybe she'll become more mature, so we need to get her married off soon. Really? Shouldn't she start doing housework and working properly first? Getting married in her current state? My mother and I often had such conversations. I thought my mother was just venting, but she actually found a prospective husband for Ruby. He was an employee at a large company, the same age as Ruby. He had a kind personality and was a great match for marriage. My parents strongly encouraged Ruby to get married. As a result, she really did get married. Having started a family, she was supposed to become more mature. But my parents' hopes were completely shattered. Ruby started calling every day to complain. Listen, Sophia. The other day was my birthday, right? But my husband only said happy birthday in the morning. Can you believe that? I lightly responded to the usually indignant Ruby. So what? It's too late. If he doesn't celebrate the moment the date changes, it doesn't count. And the necklace he got me wasn't even from my favorite brand. Can you believe that? You know, that's pretty selfish. Ignoring my rebuke, Ruby raised her voice even more. No, it's not. It's natural for him to fulfill my wishes. I sighed quietly, thinking here we go again. Ruby's daily routine was to berate her husband over trivial matters. At first, she called our parents, but her complaints were so frequent that they got fed up. They started making excuses not to answer her calls, so she turned to me instead. Ruby thinks the world revolves around her. If things don't go her way, it's a barrage of complaints and whining. At first, I listened, but eventually, I started giving half-hearted responses. Listening to her seriously all the time was too exhausting. It wasn't just me and our parents who felt this way. Ruby's husband was also worn out by her. She rarely did any housework and always had excuses. Despite this, she was incredibly demanding, making her husband stand in long lines at famous stores to buy her favorite foods or brands. If he refused, she'd lecture him about not loving her enough. Unless he constantly praised her, she'd get in a bad mood and ignore him for days. After enduring this for some time, Ruby's husband finally reached his limit. He left the divorce papers and walked out of the house. It was only 6 months after they got married. Ruby was furious about her ex-husband's actions and complained bitterly. My parents were also in shock, and we had family meetings every day during that time. However, I remained calm. It seemed like the inevitable result to me. Ruby decided to leave the house she had shared with her ex-husband and move back to our parents' house. I thought she was going back to her old lifestyle. Just when I thought that, something unexpected happened. Our parents were suddenly killed in a car accident. They had gone shopping and were hit by a car driven by someone who wasn't paying attention. They never came back. Ruby and I were in tremendous shock. But there was no time to wallow in grief. As we were finishing the wake, the funeral, and other necessary procedures in a daze, something caught my eye. "What's this?" Several envelopes came out of our parents' dresser. When I opened them, I found they were demand letters for debts. The amount was substantial. I had no idea they had so much debt. What had they spent all this money on? Looking closely, I saw that the credit card limits had been maxed out. And this was with multiple companies. At that moment, I remembered something our parents had said when they were alive. They mentioned that since Ruby shopped a lot, they had given her a few credit cards. "Ruby! What the hell is this about?" I quickly confronted her and yelled. "Huh? What do you mean? Don't play dumb. What did you spend all this money on?" I shoved the demand letters in her face, and Ruby just laughed it off. "Well, on clothes, bags, delicious food, and trips. I can't help it, can I? You can't live without some fun." "What?" Her excuse was unbelievable. The cards were in Dad's name, so he must have been paying while he was alive. But there's still a lot left unpaid. I was horrified and felt dizzy. "Don't worry. You can pay it off, Sophia," Ruby said cheerfully, and I lost my temper. "You've got to be kidding me. Why should I?" "Because I'm not good at working." "Thanks, sis. Don't mess with me." Why should I have to clean up Ruby's mess? Shaking with anger, I clenched my fists. But regardless, the debt had to be repaid. Ruby was unreliable, so I desperately racked my brain to figure out what to do. In the end, I concluded that selling our parents' house was the only option. The house our parents lived in wasn't new, but fortunately, it was close to the station and in a good location. With any luck, we could offset the debt. When I started the process, I managed to sell it for a better price than I had expected. I felt relieved. But that relief was short-lived. "Hey, where am I supposed to go? I was planning to move back home, but now I can't because you sold it." I glanced at Ruby, who was yelling loudly, and coldly replied, "Go wherever you want." "Then I guess I'll live with you and Oliver." "What?" She had come up with another outrageous idea. "But I don't have anywhere else to go. What else can I do?" "Sis?" She was trying to act cute. I glared at Ruby, who was grinning. Oliver and I had just bought a new house. We had planned it as a 2-family home with an eye on our future. For now, we had extra rooms that could accommodate a few people. But living with this selfish Ruby? I was about to refuse when I remembered something my mother had said before she passed away. "Sophia, if something happens to us, will you take care of Ruby? She's still like a child in many ways, so please look after her." It's true that Ruby has no ability to live independently. If I left her on her own and she ended up on the streets, I'd feel guilty. I sighed. Then, in a weak voice, I said, "Only for a little while, okay? Once you find a job and can rent your own place, you need to move out." Yay! Thanks, sis. I felt a surge of irritation at Ruby's joyful little dance. Reluctantly, I told my husband Oliver that my sister would be living with us for a while. Oliver, ever easygoing, said, "Oh, Ruby? Poor thing, losing her place to stay right after the divorce. She can stay with us as long as she needs." "That's not possible. You don't know anything about Ruby." I had told him about Ruby's selfish nature, but since he didn't have any sisters, he didn't quite get it. He probably thought it was just cute, girlish whims. I had a bad feeling that my life would be turned upside down by Ruby. And that premonition turned out to be spot on. "Hey, are we having meat and potatoes for dinner again? I'm sick of them," Ruby complained while eating the dinner I had made. "Again? It was just about a week ago, right? If you're tired of it, why don't you cook yourself?" "Oh, come on, I can't cook." "Then stop complaining." Ruby laughed it off. "This isn't a complaint, it's just an opinion. Ever since I let her move in, it's been like this. She doesn't help with the housework, nor does she seem to be looking for a job. She helps out at a snack bar run by a friend a couple of days a week, but she has no intention of working full-time. I appreciated her playing with my young son, Aaron. But even that came with its problems. There were times when she'd get so absorbed in the TV that she wouldn't notice Aaron getting too close to the stove and burning himself. Or when she'd ignore Aaron to hang out in brand-name clothing stores, resulting in him getting lost. I was getting really frustrated. "Hey, Oliver. About Ruby, she doesn't seem to be looking for a job, she doesn't do any housework, and she can't be trusted to look after Aaron properly. I want her to leave." Taking advantage of Ruby's absence, I vented to Oliver. But as usual, his response was carefree. "Come on, Ruby's just leaning on you. You're her much older sister, so be a bit more patient. When she's with me, she's polite and kind. And not everyone is cut out for housework. Besides, you going back to work full-time so soon after giving birth might be why you can't handle everything, including taking care of Aaron. Pushing it all on Ruby isn't fair either." "What are you talking about?" "I went back to work because I had to think about the mortgage and Aaron's education costs." Oliver looked at me with a blank expression as I retorted. Yeah. You're saying my salary isn't enough, right?" "I never said that." It was the same old story. Oliver was unusually protective of Ruby. She was putting on an act around him, and each conversation seemed to lead to criticism of my job. It seems he doesn't like the fact that I work full-time. He probably wanted me to quit my job and be a stay-at-home mom. Our discussions always ended on a sour note. Then one day, it happened. "Mom, my game cartridge is missing." "What?" Aaron, now in elementary school, came to me with tears in his eyes. It was the game cartridge I had bought for his birthday. No way, he had already lost it. We searched the entire house but couldn't find it anywhere. "That's strange, huh?" When I looked into the trash can, I was horrified. There was a receipt from a second-hand bookstore. It had the name of the game cartridge I had bought for Aaron. Buyback amount, $100. "What the heck is this?" Someone had sold the game cartridge. There was only one person in this house who would do such a thing. "Ruby! Did you sell Aaron's game cartridge without asking?" "Oh, you found out?" I thought she'd try to play dumb, but Ruby admitted it easily. "Yeah, sorry about that. I'm broke this month. But this game is popular now, right? I got a good price for it. Thanks." As soon as she said that, Aaron started to cry. I couldn't take it anymore. "How could you do that? Selling a child's belongings without permission is unbelievable." I can't keep someone like that in this house. Get out right now. Fueled by anger, I screamed. Ruby immediately started to whine. You don't have to be so mad. Kicking me out is too cruel. Mom and Dad are gone, and you're the only one I can rely on. Tears started to flow from Ruby's eyes. Cut it out, that's so fake. Even if Ruby ended up on the streets, I wouldn't care. But when she mentioned our parents, my resolve weakened. I remembered my mother's words, take care of Ruby if anything happens to us. In the end, after much deliberation, I reluctantly forgave Ruby. I'd have to buy the game cartridge back for Aaron. Feeling exhausted, I warned Ruby. Don't ever sell our family's belongings without permission again. If you do, I won't forgive you. Okay. Ruby was already back to her usual self. I doubted she even felt sorry. This kind of thing happened over and over again, and 18 years passed. There were many conflicts, but each time, Ruby would cry, or Oliver would defend her, and things would return to square one. In the meantime, Aaron grew up strong and healthy. He graduated from high school and college, got a job, and started living on his own. Yet, Ruby was still living with us. I was 52, and Ruby was 42. One day, I came home from work and walked into the living room, where I saw Ruby sitting unusually upright. Next to her, Oliver was also sitting with a serious expression. Sophia, come over here. We need to talk. Feeling suspicious, I sat down across from Oliver and Ruby. Now that Aaron has started his job, I think it's a good time. A good time for what? I had no idea what he was talking about. When I looked at Ruby, she was grinning. Oliver cleared his throat and declared firmly, I'm divorcing you and marrying Ruby. What? This must be what they mean by left speechless. I was so stunned by the absurdity of it all that I couldn't react. Sophia, I'm sorry. We're in love. In love? What kind of joke is this? It's not a joke. We've been nurturing our love since I moved in 18 years ago. I thought my eyes were going to pop out of my head. I couldn't understand what she was saying at all. Oliver spoke, blushing. Living together, I realized how charming Ruby is. She's sweet and knows how to show affection. Unlike you, always angry, I just fell for her. It's a bit embarrassing to say it out loud. Oh, Oliver, you're so embarrassing. They gazed into each other's eyes. What was I witnessing? But I feel relieved. I've wanted to tell you for a long time. We're planning to have a wedding, of course. You'll give us your blessing, right? It's your sister's happiness, after all. Are you both out of your minds? This is insane. Oh, you're so scary, sis. Ruby, feigning fear, clung to Oliver. Oliver gently embraced her. It looked like they were about to start a love scene, and it gave me chills. I stood up from my chair. If I stayed here any longer, I'd lose it. In a fury, I packed my things and stormed out of the house without a word. I immediately called Aaron. I had to tell him about this twisted situation. That his father and aunt were in some bizarre love affair. Thankfully, Aaron picked up quickly. After I briefly explained the situation, he said, "Come over to my place and we'll talk." I took the train and went to Aaron's apartment. No way, Dad and Aunt Ruby. This is insane. Aaron, who welcomed me in, was completely freaked out. Of course, he was. There was no way we could bless them in such a situation. Exactly. It's disgusting, totally unbelievable. Yeah, looking back, it was kind of suspicious. They used to sneak out together. And Aunt Ruby stole my game cartridge to sell for cash and took food from my plate that she liked. Dad really has no judgment getting involved with her. I nodded vigorously at Aaron, who was now looking down on his father. And they said they're planning to have a wedding. It's unbelievable. Anyway, Aaron cut me off before I could continue my rant. Speaking of the wedding, The words that followed left me in shock. How many times had I been shocked today? Suppressing my pounding heart, I listened to Aaron. If the timing works out, we might be able to give those two a taste of their own medicine. Do you mean? Aaron smiled mischievously. When did he start making that kind of face? He must have suffered so much because of Ruby. I felt deeply sorry for having let someone like her into our home. After that, Aaron and I had many discussions. We decided to execute a certain plan. Ruby and Oliver needed to realize their foolishness firsthand. That was all I wanted. I believed my parents in heaven would understand. Ruby, who betrayed me despite all my care for her. And Oliver. I could never forgive those two. I was determined to get my revenge. Soon after, I arranged to stay at a business hotel. I could commute to work from there for a while. Aaron had offered, "You can stay with me," but I didn't want to impose any further. Besides, the hotel near my office had good amenities and was comfortable. It would cost money, but I was working full-time and had some savings, so it wasn't a problem for now. Oliver had always complained about me working full-time, but it turned out that having money saved was very useful in a pinch. A few weeks later, Aaron contacted me. "Mom, I got a wedding invitation from Dad and Aunt Ruby. There's one for you too. They think you're staying with me." "Really, that's convenient." "Aaron, how's our plan?" "Everything's set." "All right, let's begin." I had already mailed the divorce papers to Oliver, and they had been processed by the city office. So, I didn't care if Oliver and Ruby got married or whatever. But sending me a wedding invitation after stealing my husband, what kind of nerve did they have? They're beyond ignorant, they're insane. By now, those two are probably enjoying themselves without a care. But life doesn't always go as planned. I needed to make sure Ruby understood that deeply. I had already set my revenge in motion. I was looking forward to their wedding day. A few months later. Finally, the day of their wedding arrived. I dressed in a chic outfit I had bought for the occasion. Taking the train to the venue, I found that the relatives had already gathered. After greeting them briefly, I opened the door to the waiting room. There stood Aaron in his tuxedo. "Aaron, congratulations on your wedding." "Thanks, Mom." Yes, today was Aaron's wedding day. He was marrying his college girlfriend. Aaron's job required him to move around, so he wanted to establish a stable home life in preparation for the future. On the day I rushed to Aaron's place after leaving home, he had shared his thoughts with me. Of course, I had already met Aaron's girlfriend. Her name was Mia Smith. She was a serious and polite young lady with no faults. Aaron smiled and said, "Mia is strong-willed. She's already got me wrapped around her finger." I was happy to welcome such a capable girl into the family. But as we talked, I realized that my child-rearing days were truly over. Of course, there was a tinge of sadness. Yet the joy of seeing him grow up far outweighed it. "So, how are things over there?" "Oh, right. Let me check." I pulled out my smartphone and tapped the screen. The scene of another wedding venue appeared. There were Ruby in her dress and Oliver in his tuxedo. They were anxiously looking around. They seemed confused as to why no one had shown up for their wedding. I couldn't help but laugh. Aaron's wedding and their wedding were on the same day. Of course, the venues were different. Theirs was about 2 train stations away. I had arranged for a camera to be set up at their venue and linked it to my smartphone so I could see what was happening. Naturally, they had no idea. This was Aaron and my plan. We coordinated Aaron's wedding to coincide with Ruby and Oliver's. I had already explained everything to the relatives beforehand. They were all furious at Ruby's outrageous behavior and Oliver's foolishness. And they agreed to cooperate with our plan. They all RSVP'd to Ruby and Oliver's invitations saying they'd attend, but in reality, they were all here at Aaron's wedding, including myself. There was no way any guests would show up at Ruby's and Oliver's venue. I hadn't contacted their friends, so if they came, it wouldn't be completely empty. But, to my surprise, no one showed up except those two. It must have been their lack of integrity catching up with them. They no longer had friends who'd want to attend their wedding. Let me see, too. Aaron peeked at my phone screen. Then, he laughed just as heartily as I did. Ruby and Oliver were still frantically looking around. I turned up the volume to hear them better. Oliver! No one's here. What's going on? You didn't forget to send the invitations, did you? Of course not, you checked them too. Maybe I wrote the wrong venue on the invitations. Oliver stammered, and Ruby raised her voice. Don't joke with me. I'm the bride. I'm the most beautiful today, and no one is here to see it. This is unbelievable. Ruby, in her flashy dress, was fuming. The scene was so absurd it felt like a comedy. Who would want to celebrate the wedding of such selfish people? Exactly. They needed this kind of lesson. We nodded in agreement. Then, Aaron's wedding started. Mia looked stunning in her wedding dress, incomparable to Ruby. Aaron, ready to take on the responsibilities of a family, looked resolute. Seeing my son, who I still thought of as a child, looking so mature moved me deeply. The food was delicious, and I enjoyed chatting with the relatives. I forgot all about Ruby and Oliver and enjoyed the wonderful ceremony. As the wedding neared its end, it was time to see off the guests. We handed out gifts and took photos. Everyone was in a cheerful mood. When a commotion broke out in the lobby, I turned to see what was happening and was shocked by what I saw. Ruby and Oliver had barged in. They were both sweaty and out of breath, and Ruby's dress was dirty, as if she'd fallen somewhere. How on earth did they find us? So, this is where you all are? Oliver's voice startled the relatives. They were momentarily confused but quickly began to ignore Oliver and Ruby. As instructed, I had told them beforehand to completely ignore Ruby and Oliver if they ever showed up. I stopped Aaron from stepping forward to confront them. I couldn't let him deal with this on his big day. This was my responsibility to handle. How did you find us? When no one showed up, I thought something was wrong. I called nearby venues to check, and they said there was a wedding for Aaron here. Oliver was red with anger. Ruby glared at me too, but with her makeup smeared from sweat, and her dress dirty like a rag. She looked ridiculous. Perfect. Since everyone is here, we'll have our wedding right here. What? Are you out of your mind? Hey. Ruby ignored me and marched towards Aaron and Mia. She fixed her eyes on Mia. Move aside. I'm the star today, she shouted, charging at Mia. What are you doing? Run, Mia. I yelled, but just then, a loud thud echoed through the lobby. Ruby was on the floor. Mia stood over her calmly. I've been practicing judo since elementary school. Mia had thrown Ruby with a perfect shoulder throw. Aaron had often said, Mia is strong, and now I understood why. As I stood there, impressed, Oliver rushed to Ruby's side. Ruby! Ruby! Get up! Hey, what have you done to her? That's my line, Dad! Aaron shouted, shielding Mia. Mom and I have put up with Aunt Ruby for so long. And now you're divorcing Mom to marry Aunt Ruby? Are you insane? I've been disappointed in you for a long time, Dad, but this takes the cake. Oliver muttered, looking ashamed. How can you speak to your father like that? I stepped between them. Are you satisfied now? Take Ruby and get out. What? It's my son's big day, and you're not welcome here. Don't ever bother us again. I said sharply. Oliver muttered incoherently and fell silent. Ruby, regaining consciousness, mumbled deliriously. I'm the star, everyone look at me. As she tried to stand, Mia laughed softly and said, Your underwear is showing. What? Maybe it was during the shoulder throw, but Ruby's dress had torn, leaving her underwear completely visible. Even Ruby was half crazed by this. No. Don't look. Let's go home. Oliver, hurry. Oh, okay. So, Oliver carried Ruby away, staggering as they left the scene. First she says look at me, then don't look. Make up your mind. My comment made Mia and Aaron chuckle. The storm had passed, it seemed. Ruby and Oliver had been humiliated in front of everyone. Hopefully, this would teach them to become better people. But their bad luck didn't end there. Oliver's company went through restructuring due to poor business conditions and decided to lay off employees. He received a severance package, but most of it went to paying off debts from Ruby's extravagant spending. It turned out that during the 18 years they lived together, Ruby had been secretly getting money from Oliver. Given that she resorted to selling Aaron's game cartridge, she must have been desperate for cash, but I never imagined she had run up such large debts again. Of course, Oliver hurried to find a new job. But being over 50 with no special qualifications or skills made it tough. He couldn't find any steady work, and the money quickly dwindled. Originally, he had planned to use the severance pay to pay off their mortgage, but that wasn't possible anymore, so they had to sell their house. They ended up living in a small hotel. Now, Oliver works day-to-day jobs to scrape together some money. Ruby lost her job when the snack bar run by her acquaintance closed down, leaving her with no job prospects at all. Ruby, who had never worked seriously, probably never would. She would continue to leech off others for the rest of her life. Oliver became her target. Once, while walking through town, I saw them together. Ruby and Oliver were rummaging through discarded food behind a supermarket. They looked gaunt, clearly not eating properly. Oh, I want to eat steak. Oliver, do something. Sorry, this is all I can give you now. Oliver handed her an expired pastry from the discard cart. No. I can't live like this. Ruby cried out, sobbing. Despite her complaints, she couldn't leave Oliver, who was supporting her. At this point, they were bound to fall into ruin together. Unable to bear watching anymore, I left. It was a cruel ending, but it was inevitable. Ruby, who did nothing but depend on others and repay kindness with betrayal. And Oliver, who chose to stay with her despite everything. They were two of a kind. There was nothing I could do but cut ties with them. As for me, my years of service were recognized, and I was promoted to department manager. I moved out of the business hotel and rented a spacious apartment. This place was big enough for Aaron and his family to visit without feeling cramped. Aaron and Mia had a baby girl. And visiting my granddaughter became my new joy. That shoulder throw of yours was impressive, Mia, I said, and she smiled shyly. Oh, Mom, please forget about that. It's embarrassing. No way, but our daughter will inherit Mia's strength. She eats a lot too, Aaron said happily while playing with their child. That's wonderful. After all, health is the most important thing. We chatted about trivial things, enjoying each other's company. Life without Ruby was surprisingly peaceful. My second life didn't go exactly as planned, but it was far from over. I wanted to continue enjoying each day to the fullest. How long do you think you can act so high and mighty, being an infertile woman? Just get out now. How long do you plan on making my beloved woman wait? It was a few weeks ago when my husband confessed to having a mistress and a hidden child. My mother-in-law, eager to live with her grandchild as soon as possible, urged me to divorce my husband and leave. Even though I agreed to divorce, I asked for some time because I needed to find a new place to live. Of course, it was a discussion based on the premise of divorce, so my husband reluctantly agreed. I explained that I thought a second wife would dislike traces of the previous wife, so I wanted to clean up before leaving and asked if I could spend a little time outside before coming back. Encouraged by my firm declaration that I would definitely leave by the end of the day, my husband and his mother agreed to my request and left the house. A few hours later, I also left the house, so I didn't have to face my husband or mother-in-law. When my husband returned and saw the state of the house, he panicked and called me non-stop. my husband and mother-in-law confronted me about my claims, leading to the revelation of an unbelievable truth. Before and after getting married, I've been in my 30s and loved my job. It's a very rewarding job, and my salary reflects the work I put in. The company I work for has many female bosses and managers, and they provide excellent support for returning to work after maternity leave, so half of the employees are women. When I turned 30, my husband came to work for our company as a temp worker. He was assigned to my team, and he's been working hard with me through good times and bad. He noticed my husband and began to consider marriage because he felt the same passion for his job as I did. Also, he had a positive attitude toward women's advancement in society. With him, I felt that even if I got married, I could continue with my beloved job. But my husband is younger than me, and he's also a temporary worker. Temporary work means that if the contract is not renewed, you have to find a new assignment from scratch, and it's hard to call it stable income. Also, there's no guarantee if something goes wrong, and thinking about the future, there were too many risks to start a family. Naturally, there was strong opposition from those around us. Especially my parents, who held on to the old-fashioned belief that men should be responsible for supporting their families. While they reluctantly accepted that I could continue working, they insisted that men should bear the financial burden of supporting the household. I was forced to promise never to rely on my parents under any circumstances, and somehow managed to persuade my husband to marry me. And now, my husband, mother-in-law, and I live together as a family of 3. Before we got married, my husband and mother-in-law lived together in an apartment. My husband was very worried about leaving his mother alone. Also, since it wasn't public housing, it was difficult for an unemployed and elderly mother-in-law to secure a rental contract. When I met my husband, my father-in-law had already passed away. It seems that my mother-in-law was somehow managing to live on the inheritance left by my father-in-law. It appears that she was able to continue the contract by promising to continue living with my husband. Living in the apartment where the two of them resided was also an option, but it was very cramped and uncomfortable. If it were just my husband, he could have come to live in the condominium where I reside, as there would have been enough room. However, as a contract worker, my husband had limitations on the rental amount he could afford, and it would have been difficult to find a place where all 3 of us could live unless it was in my name. Even if we were to live separately from my mother-in-law, I would still have to handle her rental contract, and considering that, living together with the 3 of us seemed like the best option, so I agreed to live with my mother-in-law. When it came time to sign the contract for the condominium, I asked if it would be possible even with my husband being a contract worker, but I was told it would be easier if I, with a stable income, signed the contract. In my husband's case, they asked for various conditions, such as providing 2 guarantors other than relatives. I dislike doing things halfway. I wouldn't impose it on others, but I just can't settle without a sense of accomplishment that I did it properly within myself. While I'm the one married and earning outside to support the family financially, I didn't want to neglect household chores. I wake up earlier than anyone else to prepare breakfast, pack lunch for my mother-in-law, and do the laundry before heading to work. Even when I have to work late, I stop by the store on my way home to buy groceries and try to prepare dinner as much as possible. Seeing me like this, my mother-in-law often praises me, saying how lucky she is to have such a capable daughter-in-law. It's been 6 months since we got married. My husband is still a contract worker as usual. When we were getting married, my father asked him if he could become a full-time employee within 6 months. My husband once said, "I'll definitely make it," and reluctantly, my father agreed. It's been about 6 months since that promise, but are you going to become a full-time employee? Eventually. But your father hasn't even contacted me once since we got married. Promises are pretty much meaningless, aren't they? Well, that's how it goes. It was within my expectations. In the end, verbal promises often turn out this way. I've come to think that it's better for him to at least work as a contract employee than to just lounge around at home. Isn't it about time you started contributing to our living expenses, even just a little? I can't afford it because job hunting is expensive. Besides, Didn't Mom say she's been covering our living expenses from Dad's inheritance? What? That's news to me. Neither my husband nor my mother-in-law has ever given me any living expenses. After investigating further, I learned that my husband hadn't been actively job hunting at all. Instead, he used all the money he received as pocket money to spend on whatever he liked. As for my mother-in-law covering our living expenses from my father-in-law's inheritance, it seemed she was using it for her own leisure activities, just like my husband. My guess is that when my husband noticed his father's inheritance dwindling, he confronted my mother-in-law, who probably said she was giving me the money as living expenses to hide her spending habits. Being kept in the dark and used as a pawn is frustrating, but I decided it was better to avoid confrontation and let things be if they were working out. This situation continued for a while, and before I knew it, several years had passed since we got married. During this time, I had been promoted and received salary increases, becoming more and more the breadwinner of the family. It became natural for me to shoulder all the living expenses. In my mid-30s, I began to think that if I wanted to have children, now was the time. Considering my career progression, taking some time off for maternity leave wouldn't be a problem at all. However, I couldn't discuss this with my husband as he was often coming home late, and we couldn't find the right time to talk about it. Of course, it's been so long since we had any intimacy that I can't even be bothered to count how long it's been. Amidst this, my mother-in-law started treating me more and more harshly. "When are you going to show me the face of my grandchild? Aren't you pregnant with that figure?" Recently, seeing my plump figure, my mother-in-law thought I was finally pregnant and was happy. But when she found out it was just weight gain, her attitude changed. "You just gained weight because of your good appetite? Don't play tricks on me. You got me all excited for nothing. You, with infertility, and that figure, you're just a fat, useless wife." I've always had a tendency to overeat when under stress. During the term exam and school days, while my friends were losing weight due to nerves, I was just getting plumper. Lately, with the strain in my relationship with my husband, my appetite has increased. "A fat wife like you is disgraceful. If you're infertile, be infertile, and stop pretending with your misleading figure." Despite my income supporting our livelihood, my mother-in-law began to berate me as a useless wife. When my husband wasn't present during dinner, I was weighed before and after meals. If the scale didn't show maintenance or weight loss, I'd be forced to reduce my portions or, at worst, my homemade dinner prepared with my own money would be taken away. The stress continued to mount, and I found myself consuming more snacks between work, worsening my physical condition. Then, one day, my husband, who rarely came home early, suddenly announced divorce. "What do you mean by divorce?" "I have a child with someone I truly love, born last year." My husband had an affair and has a child he wants to acknowledge with his mistress. Even with such sudden news, I was unsure of how to respond. Then my mother-in-law emerged from her room. "So, you finally told your useless wife. I've been waiting forever. Hurry up and divorce her so we can welcome the grandchild." My mother-in-law demanded I divorce and leave the house. "What a clueless wife you are. Didn't you notice your husband's affair? When a man comes home late every night, it's because he's cheating. Did you know about it, mother-in-law?" "Of course. I've already met the grandchild. Such a sweet child. His mistress." Furthermore, my mother-in-law said this. "My husband never made serious efforts to become a full-time employee for me, but he's diligently searched for a company that would hire him full-time to start a family with his mistress. It seems my husband will soon be employed as a full-time employee. My son never had an interest in older women. He married you out of curiosity, but he always complained that having an older wife was difficult. I knew I'd be resented if I lectured them. So I tried my best to avoid that as much as possible. If I pretended not to notice, and if everything in the house ran smoothly, then I thought that would be fine. But this is the result. If I had been more involved in my husband's work and it still ended up the same, then I shouldn't have endured the stress of holding back. With a heavy heart, I agreed to the divorce my husband proposed. It seemed like a waste of time to stay with someone who wasn't invested. I agreed to the divorce. But, could you wait for a while? I want to prepare to leave and find a new place. Isn't that fine? If we kick you out right away, we might end up looking like the bad guys. Even though he's already committed adultery, I thought he was already the bad guy, but without delving into that, I expressed gratitude for my husband's lenient decision. Just like before, I continued to live in the apartment. However, there was a sudden turn of events on the Sunday of the third week since my husband told me about the divorce. He brought his mistress to our house. How long do you plan to linger here? With your ability to handle work so well, you should be able to find a place to stay in a day, right? Taking advantage of our silence, you're quite audacious. That's exactly right. You haven't fulfilled any of your duties as a wife, so hurry up and get out. Sooner or later, being pressured like this was within my expectations. I just needed one more day, so I requested it. Your wife will be coming to this house, won't she? I want to completely erase any traces I've left behind. You wouldn't like it either, right? I sought agreement from the mistress standing beside my husband. The mistress agreed naturally, saying that the place should be cleaned up just like when moved in. I nodded in agreement to the mistress's statement. How about spending a meaningful time at a hotel for just one day with the three of us? I'll cover the expenses. I immediately booked a hotel room from my phone. After informing them that the payment had been made, my husband and the mistress left without any objections. However, my mother-in-law emphasized, almost as a parting shot, make sure you're gone by the time we return. True to my promise with the three of them, I left the apartment that evening. I decided to stay at a different hotel from the one booked for the three of them. After having dinner at the hotel and returning to the room to relax, I turned on my phone, which had been turned off. Just then, the ringing tone started blaring. Since I hadn't removed my husband and mother-in-law from my contacts, it was obvious who the caller was. The calls were pouring in, alternating between my mother-in-law and my husband. With a sense of dread about what the calls might entail, I was hesitant to answer. I didn't want to hear my mother-in-law's annoying nagging voice or my husband's insolent tone. But if I ignored them, I had no idea what those three would do next. Reluctantly, I answered the phone, and my husband immediately bellowed, "What the hell have you done?" "What do you mean?" "When I got home, all the furniture was gone. Return all the stolen furniture immediately, you thief." Stolen furniture? Thief? I wanted to shout back that I was the one who bought all the furniture and they hadn't contributed a penny, but I knew getting emotional would be a loss, so I suppressed my feelings. I made an effort to remain composed and calmly conveyed the truth to them. "The rental contract for the apartment has also been terminated, so please vacate by the end of this month." "What? Who gave you the right to terminate it on your own?" "Yeah, that's right. By the end of this month? Isn't that tomorrow?" Furthermore, they complained that despite letting me stay for 3 weeks, I showed no gratitude, or demanded that I pay for the lavish hotel stay today. The hotel stay was their own doing, and I had nothing to do with it. I only paid for the hotel room. They insulted me, calling me stingy, a heartless wife, and so on. Since there was no point in listening to such insults, I hung up and blocked their numbers. The next day, when I finished work and left the office, my mother-in-law and husband were waiting for me outside, apparently having pressured the company to make me leave. However, the employee who answered the phone had refrained from connecting me, stating that I was currently in a meeting. It was simply because I had back-to-back meetings and discussions with clients all day, not an intentional avoidance. However, my mother-in-law and husband mistakenly believed that the company deliberately prevented them from reaching me, so they waited to catch me after work. "We finally caught you. You're not getting away now. Explain yourself. Return the furniture you took with you." In response, I explained that since I was moving out of that house, it was only natural for me to take my belongings with me. However, the two of them furrowed their brows and tilted their heads in confusion. I had the rental contract for that apartment in my name, and I was the one paying the rent. Furthermore, I personally selected and fully paid for all the furniture. Isn't it natural for me to take my belongings with me? Then, my husband suddenly brought up the concept of loan for use, as if he had researched it somewhere. He argued that although I was the tenant of the room, since I was cohabiting with my incapable mother-in-law and husband, it was as if I had lent them the furniture for free. It seemed like they were interpreting things quite favorably for themselves. I told them that if they wanted to pursue legal matters, I was willing to fight it out with the help of a professional. I also questioned whether people who couldn't even manage their own lives could afford to hire a lawyer. If they had that kind of money, it would be better spent on re-signing the apartment. Regardless, from now on, it would be my husband and mother-in-law who would be paying the rent. But can you afford to keep paying the rent for that apartment every month as a contract employee? Besides, the rent doesn't match your income, so I doubt you'll be able to re-sign the lease. The apartment we had been renting also had condominium units available for purchase. With a certain amount of savings, it should have been possible to buy one. I added that it also depended on how much inheritance my mother-in-law had left from my father-in-law, and then I attempted to leave. However, my husband blocked my path and prevented me from leaving. "You always make a fool out of me. That's what annoys me about you." Furthermore, my husband boasted that since he would soon become a full-time employee, renewing the apartment lease or buying a condominium wouldn't be a problem. He still didn't know the truth. As a final act of kindness, I suggested we continue the conversation elsewhere and escorted both of them into a taxi. We headed to the house of my late father-in-law's sister. My aunt-in-law was a very strict person who despised those who strayed from the right path or sought to live an easy life. Since my mother-in-law and husband tended to lean towards wanting an easy life and were weak to their desires, they had always found my aunt-in-law's strictness irritating and had a strong aversion to her. When I married a younger man with an unstable income, my aunt was the one who sympathized with me and occasionally deepened our friendship. In that context, I learned that when my husband was dispatched to the company where my aunt worked, along with my mother-in-law, he had asked to be hired as a full-time employee, but was refused. My aunt held a high position in the company, which was a well-known corporation that most people had heard of. This conversation took place after our marriage. I was surprised when my aunt told me about it because I had been unaware of the situation. When I asked why he wasn't hired, the reason was obvious, so it was a moment when I resigned myself to the fact that my husband's chances of becoming a full-time employee were slim. When I heard that my husband was almost hired as a full-time employee because he wanted to remarry with his mistress, I felt relieved along with surprise. But it turned out to be different. My husband had been job hunting using my aunt's name without her knowledge. Of course, neither my aunt nor I knew about it. It came to light when my husband used my aunt's name to apply for a job at a company where she had a long-standing personal and professional relationship. Upon learning this information, my aunt became concerned about my husband's behavior and conducted a thorough investigation into his conduct. As a result, my husband's old bad habits persisted, and in fact, they worsened as he grew older. When he was dispatched to the company where I work, I often saw him working diligently. His aspiration to become a full-time employee someday didn't seem like a lie. However, before he was dispatched to my company, he had his contracts terminated multiple times due to his poor attitude at work. There were even times when his contracts were terminated within a day. It seems that being dispatched to my company was his last chance. If he couldn't work without causing any problems until the end of the contract, he would have been removed from the dispatch register. The period when he worked alongside me was diligent, and it should have led to a contract renewal. However, perhaps it was difficult for him to work under his wife's supervision, so he chose not to renew the contract. He used to say that he wanted to gain various experiences before becoming a full-time employee. Due to his good performance at the time, it seems that he was dispatched to the major company where my aunt works. It was in the course of this investigation that it was discovered that my husband had a mistress. Knowing about the child between the two and that my mother-in-law also knew about it, my aunt seemed to have been deeply troubled. However, she believed I had the right to know, so she informed me of everything. Therefore, I had been aware that my husband would take some action sooner or later. I never expected him to bring up divorce in such a condescending manner. However, since my aunt informed me, I had been gradually preparing for divorce, so I felt relieved that she finally opened up about the secret. My aunt informed the company where my husband boasted of becoming a full-time employee of his misdeeds. She subtly let it be known to someone with whom she had both personal and professional connections, leaving the final decision up to them. However, she earnestly requested that if they decided not to change the decision to hire him, they should at least avoid hiring him based on her recommendation due to their relationship. The HR department of the company where my husband was supposed to work had a policy of not interfering in private matters, so they conveyed to my aunt that as long as he fulfilled his job responsibilities, they wouldn't rescind the offer. However, after conducting their own investigation into my husband's behavior, including the divorce controversy with me, they decided to rescind the offer and informed my aunt of their decision. Normally, an offer wouldn't be rescinded due to divorce. In my husband's case, it was the details of the divorce that led to the offer being rescinded. I wish I had been the one to suggest divorce after being cheated on, but instead, it was the one who cheated who proposed divorce, and to make matters worse, it all came out that I was the one paying for everything, including living expenses. My aunt told my husband that he should expect a cancellation notice any day now. If only you had hired me, none of this mess would have happened. My husband began to shout, blaming my aunt for everything. In response, my aunt told him that as long as he continued to blame others, getting a job was just a pipe dream. Unable to win against my aunt no matter what he said, my husband fell silent. Seizing the opportunity, I said to my husband, "I'll be seeking compensation from you for your infidelity." After informing them that we would discuss matters through lawyers from now on, my husband and mother-in-law were kicked out of my aunt's house. To avoid being seen as picking up knowledge from the internet, I decided to keep written records of all interactions with my husband and mother-in-law. Furthermore, it would be helpful to have someone knowledgeable in law assist me. I'm not sure if my husband can afford to hire a lawyer on his side. The next day, true to my aunt's word, it seemed that my husband received the cancellation notice. I heard that my husband was quite disappointed to find out it wasn't just an empty threat. In the end, my husband remained a dispatched worker and apparently remarried his mistress. The news of my husband's misconduct has spread, and he's having a hard time finding a new dispatch assignment. It's like they say, you reap what you sow, or maybe it's just desserts. Given that it's the result of my husband's naive thinking, there's no room for sympathy. With my husband's meager salary, he couldn't even rent a decent apartment, so it seems his mistress, earning more from her night job, had to step in. It seems they struggled to rent a place due to the nature of her nighttime work, but somehow managed to rent an apartment in her name. My husband talks about moving to a better-paying dispatch assignment and a bigger apartment, but it never seems to materialize, and his mistress's complaints don't stop, leaving him feeling ashamed. Living in a cramped room with no privacy for a family of 4, my husband's mistress often stays out due to her social commitments. My mother-in-law, who takes care of the children, has started to wonder why her grandchildren don't resemble my husband or his mistress as they grow older. Gathering what little inheritance my father-in-law left, we hired a private investigator to look into my husband's mistress, and what we found was shocking. She had another man on the side while dating my husband. This man was married, and it seems the mistress didn't tell him she was pregnant. Seeing my husband complain about his troubled marriage, the mistress saw him as an easy target and passed off her child as his. My mother-in-law confronted the mistress with the evidence, and the mistress flew into a rage, causing a big scene with my husband. It was undeniable that the child of the mistress bore a striking resemblance to the married man. Who do you think is supporting your sorry excuse for a life? Without me, you'd be struggling to put food on the table tomorrow. I'm leaving. I can't stand this impoverished life anymore. You can suffer and starve for all I care. It's too late for you to realize my worth later. The mistress left with her child to her parents' house. At the mistress's parents' home, they showered love and provided ample education for the child, recognizing the child's innocence, but they were extremely cold to the mistress who had returned after causing such havoc with her affair. With no place to stay, they kicked her out if she couldn't pay even a small amount for living expenses, so she ended up living in a shabby tent pitched in a corner of the yard. The promiscuous mistress, banned from entertaining male clients, now struggles with low-paying odd jobs. Left behind, my husband and mother-in-law quickly fell into financial hardship. They couldn't afford rent, utilities were cut off for non-payment, and they were struggling to put food on the table. My mother-in-law had to start working as well. My husband remains a contract worker, and his old bad habits resurfaced, leading to frequent contract terminations. In addition to receiving compensation from my husband, the process of invalidating the recognition of his child is ongoing, but it seems to be stalled due to conflicts with the mistress. Recognized for my performance and enjoying newfound freedom as a single woman, there was talk of a transfer. One of the subsidiaries offered me the opportunity to take on the role of department head in a new department they were establishing, and I readily accepted. Grateful for the opportunity, I embraced the challenge and worked hard for about 5 years. I developed a good relationship with one of my colleagues who was also part of the project, and we got married a year later, blessed with children soon after. The project was a huge success, and I entrusted it to a reliable successor. Now, I am enjoying my maternity leave to the fullest, focusing on childcare. Upon my return to work, there are talks of offering me further advancement opportunities, and I feel like my future is still full of endless possibilities. So, I'm counting on you to pay back the debt. Suddenly, my husband dumped his debt on me and disappeared. No matter how many times I contacted him, I could never get through. What am I gonna do? I can't pay this huge amount. However, there were people who saved me when I was at my wit's end. Mom, it's gonna be okay. That was my daughter. My name is Emily Johnson, I'm 35 years old. I live with my husband, Michael, work full-time and juggling with house chores. I met Michael at a matchmaking party that was supposed to be a way to make up for something. I was nervous, but Michael approached me assertively, and before I knew it, we were getting along well and exchanged contacts. After that, as we kept in touch, we became attracted to each other. And then, we started dating. I never thought I'd end up dating a man I met at a matchmaking party. When we started dating, I mentioned Michael to my sister, Elizabeth. Then Elizabeth laughed out loud and said this. You, dating a guy you met at a matchmaking party? I thought you'd quietly date someone from work. I've always been a quiet type, and even after I started drinking, I never went out for drinks with colleagues or friends. I'm surprised myself. Just went to fill the numbers, right? Yeah. When I showed her a photo of Michael, she exclaimed, he's surprisingly handsome. After that, we talked a bit about each other's recent situations and then parted ways. Elizabeth is single and doesn't have a boyfriend. Apparently, she prefers being alone, so she has no intention of marrying or getting a boyfriend. I thought that was one way of thinking, but now I want to think about the future with Michael. How happy would I be if our relationship goes well, we marry, and have children? Oh yay! On the way back from talking to Elizabeth, my face naturally brightened. Years later, Michael and I happily got married. I remember bursting into tears when he proposed. We started living in a new apartment. We hadn't lived together before, so being with Michael all day was like a dream. We both worked full-time, so the time we came home varied. But still, we ate together and slept together. We made sure to spend a lot of time together. We had overlapping holidays, so we enjoyed lazy days at home or going out for drives, spending every day happily. Then, a change came for us. We had a child. I will never forget the moment she was born. She was a very small girl, fitting perfectly in my arms. This must be what happiness is. The mood of celebration came all at once from our relatives. We named our newborn girl Bella. After Bella was born, I quit my job and worked hard every day as a full-time housewife. Michael, seeing this, helped with the household and childcare despite being tired from work. I'll take care of Bella, you rest. Thank you. I thought I was lucky to have married Michael, but years later, I realized that was a mistake. A few years after Bella was born, Michael suddenly quit his job. Michael explained to me why he quit his job. Apparently, he couldn't get along with his new boss and was feeling stressed. But I wondered, shouldn't he have discussed it with me first? Sure, if my husband is suffering, quitting is an option. But now we have a family, and we were just getting by on Michael's income, so he could have at least talked to me about it a little. This is so sudden. Did you find another job yet? Don't worry, I've thought about that. His response was not very reassuring. Honestly, I was only feeling anxious, but I guess I had no choice but to trust Michael. Afterward, Michael quickly found a new job. That was a relief. I could go out and work too, but Bella is still young, and I didn't really want to make that choice. I just wanted to watch Bella grow up a little longer. How's the new job? Can you manage? Oh, yeah, well, kinda. Did something happen at work again? Problems with your boss or colleagues? No, it's fine. Don't worry so much. Look, I'll take care of Bella, you go take a bath. Okay? Thanks. Something seemed off. But I thought it might be too pushy to ask more, so I left Bella with him and went to take a bath. A few days later, Michael came home with a gloomy face. I wanted to ask if something had happened, but then I remembered that feeling from before. Yes, when Michael suddenly quit his job. Could he have quit again? I hoped my intuition was wrong. But that hope was quickly shattered. I quit my job. Why? It just didn't fit the people at the company. They kept ordering me around, being ordered around by someone much younger than me. I can't stand it anymore. I see. Well, you can just look for another one, right? I'll help too. Then, Michael's face suddenly turned scary. He raised his voice at me. What's with that look? You don't like that I quit my job? You live off my money, after all. Talking down to me when you're just a housewife. Saying that, he threw his bag onto the living room sofa. Hey! Shut up! Michael scratched his head and took out a drink from the fridge. He drank it all at once as if to quell his irritation. I had never seen Michael like this before. At the same time, an indescribable fear struck me. I had no intention of talking down to him, I just offered to help. It seemed Michael was quite irritated, and after yelling at me for a while, he heavily sat down on the sofa. I was listening to Michael, not understanding what was happening. Was this the day the rift between Michael and me began? From this point on, Michael would repeatedly get and quit jobs. We ended up living without a stable income. Hey, maybe it's time to get a proper job? At first, I tried not to nag, thinking of Michael, but things had come to this, and I couldn't help but speak up. Shut up. You should earn the money then. You're relying too much on me. But, Bella, I don't care. By this time, Michael had lost interest in Bella, treating her somewhat like a burden. He was genuinely happy when Bella was born, but he seemed like a completely different person now. No matter how much I begged, Michael wouldn't keep a job for long. After much thought, I decided to leave Bella with Elizabeth and start working myself. I'm sorry for leaving this to you. No problem at all. Let's have fun together, Bella. Sure. Bella had just started kindergarten, but I wasn't too worried. Part of it was because she was with Elizabeth, but Bella also seemed mature for her age. She would read newspapers and could even write stories with simple words. She was quiet and seemed wise beyond her years. Initially, I was honestly anxious. Would she be able to make friends? Could she communicate well with others besides me? However, it turned out there was no need for such worries, as she did make friends. As a parent, I felt very relieved. Given these circumstances, I judged it would be fine for me to start working. Surprisingly, I got a job fairly easily. Thus, I began working full-time. The salary was quite good. With this, I could support the family even if Michael quit his jobs frequently. It was hard, but my coworkers were all kind and I could enjoy working every day. A few years after I started working, Michael finally began to take his job seriously. Perhaps he found a workplace where he could settle down. That alone gave me some peace of mind. Simultaneously, I felt that Michael's mood was gradually improving. It was as if he had returned to the Michael I knew when we first got married. He began to show concern for me working full-time, asking, "Are you okay? Aren't you tired?" It was confusing because his personality had changed so much. But I thought maybe having a stable job gave him peace of mind, and I felt a bit relieved. Bella was growing up nice and healthy. By this time, Michael had become kinder to Bella and started playing with her as a father. Bella seemed to enjoy playing with Michael, which was heartwarming to see. However, I was still afraid to quit my job. Thus, I continued to rely on Elizabeth's help. "Bella, is she okay? Doesn't she feel lonely?" "Nope. She's really good." As long as Bella was happy, that was all that mattered to me. I felt relieved and thought I should treat Elizabeth to a meal since I would continue to depend on her. A few more years passed, and Bella became a third grader, going to school happily every day. And our family relationship had improved, back to how it used to be. The times when Michael and I were at odds seemed like a distant memory. It was such a smooth period for us as a family. During this time, Michael made a suggestion. "Should we consider buying a new car soon?" "A new car?" "Yeah, the one we have is okay, but I think it's time. You know, maintenance is getting tough, and there's the smog check coming up soon." Indeed, the car we were currently using was getting pretty old. Every time the smog check came around, the number of fixes seemed to increase, and the repair costs were becoming a concern. Indeed, maybe it's about time. "That's right. I thought you'd say that, so look, I got some catalogs." "Wow, already. Thank you." I was a bit taken aback that Michael was already set on buying a new car, but we looked through the catalogs together. "Bella, come here. Which car do you want to ride in?" Michael called Bella over, and eventually, the three of us were flipping through the catalogs. However, I had no idea that this action by Michael would lead to a tragedy. A few months later, we finally decided on a car, and it was delivered. It was a brand new car costing over $30,000. The car loan was in my name. Normally, it would be in Michael's name, but his job history was so unstable that I feared he wouldn't pass the credit check. I resolved to work even harder from now on to pay off the loan. I thought Michael felt the same. But my thoughts were completely off mark. Shockingly, Michael stopped coming home. He disappeared somewhere with the new car. Could Michael have been involved in some incident? While I was confused, I received a call. The caller ID showed it was from Michael. "Hello! Michael! Where are you now?" I was so worried that I raised my voice without thinking. "Hey, don't shout like that. But, you suddenly disappeared, and the car is gone too. I was worried whether you ran away or got involved in some incident." I desperately explained how worried I was about Michael. But Michael laughed off my concerns and revealed shocking news. "Actually, I've fallen in love with someone else. I love her more than you." "What? What do you mean?" "Just what I said. I found someone I like more than you. I've filed for divorce, so don't bother me anymore." Divorce. This is too sudden. I didn't remember signing any divorce papers, but then I recalled writing them during a fight with Michael. Once signed, divorce papers indicate intent to divorce. I regretted writing them in the heat of the moment. Oh, and there's the matter of my debt. Kind of your problem now. "Debt? How much?" "About $600,000. You take care of it, will you?" Saying that, Michael hung up. Is this even possible? Was that smile he always showed me all a lie? As I thought this, all strength left me. "Mom, are you okay?" Bella gently rubbed my back as I sat slumped on the floor. "Yeah, I'm fine. Thank you." I said I was fine, but of course, I was not. How am I supposed to live now, burdened with such a massive debt? $600,000 is just too much to pay off. And the car payments are in my name too. I quickly started searching for my ATM card. Shelves, cupboards, counter, locker. I searched everywhere I could think of, but it was nowhere to be found. My ATM card was anywhere to be seen. I opened the banking app on my smartphone. The balance was reduced. I had no memory of withdrawing any money. The only person who could have done this was Michael. I couldn't get through to Michael at all. It's no use. I was lost, feeling utterly defeated. But right now, I needed to focus on earning money. There was no time to dwell on my worries. So, I redirected my attention to work. I didn't want to worry Elizabeth, so I told her nothing. Of course, I didn't tell Bella either. A few weeks after Michael had run away, I lost consciousness at work. When I woke up, I was in the hospital. "What?"
"Emily! Are you okay?"
Elizabeth." Bella was there beside Elizabeth. It seemed I had collapsed due to excessive stress. Moreover, I was forced to stay in the hospital for a few days for thorough examinations. Hospitalized. "Once you're discharged, we should talk about Michael. I've heard everything from Bella." "From Bella? Did you know everything?" "Yeah. I actually heard the phone conversation with Dad. I couldn't believe Bella knew everything. I wondered if Elizabeth would scold me after being discharged, which made me a bit gloomy. The next day, the examinations began. Then, to my shock, they found cancer. It wasn't too advanced, so they said I could get much better after surgery, so I underwent the operation. Afterward, I was discharged, which was good, but I wasn't in a condition to work for a while. I had no savings, no income. And on top of that, I needed to pay for the surgery and hospitalization costs. During this time, Elizabeth and Bella were the ones who helped me. Bella had detailed to Elizabeth about my situation and what Michael had done. Hearing this, Elizabeth was furious. She wanted to find Michael and make him pay for the debt and alimony. However, Michael's whereabouts were unknown. "We don't know where Michael is. How can we claim anything?" Then, Elizabeth had a suggestion. "Michael had the car registered under your name, right? Since you're the legal owner, why not take it back first? Can we do that?" When I expressed my doubt, Elizabeth revealed something surprising. "Actually, I found out where Michael works." It seemed that Michael was working at a company in the same building as Elizabeth. Elizabeth mostly worked remotely, but she said she saw him occasionally when she went to the office. If that was the case, then we should go to Michael right now. I was ready to confront him immediately. If we left him alone, he might disappear somewhere. However, Elizabeth stopped me. "It's reckless to go without a plan." "I have a good idea." "Well, not just me, but Bella and I." "Right. Plan." Elizabeth and Bella exchanged looks. I had no idea what they were planning. While I was staring blankly, Bella smiled broadly and said, "Don't worry, we've got it covered." What were they plotting? Even when I tried to find out, they wouldn't tell me. However, a month later, I found out what Elizabeth and Bella had done. While at Elizabeth's house, a call came in. Looking at the caller ID, it was Michael. I ignored the call once, but he kept calling persistently. Wondering what he wanted, I hesitantly answered, and Michael screamed in panic.
"Help me!
"What are you talking about?"
Just come quickly! I'm going to get arrested by the police if it stays like this."
Michael then told me his current location before hanging up. Elizabeth and Bella, who had overheard the conversation, finally revealed their plan. Actually, we had filed a stolen vehicle report. And it was Bella's idea. Isn't that great? Bella blushed shyly. I thanked Elizabeth and Bella and headed to Michael's location. It was a park relatively close to our house. Michael was surrounded by police officers. He is likely being questioned. We went to where Michael was. We explained the situation to the officers, convincing them to leave. Afterward, Michael led us into the car and started talking. Inside, a strong-willed-looking woman sat in the passenger seat. She was glaring at us. "Man, I'm glad you came. But why did the police come to me?" Michael seemed clueless, making me sigh. "Because I've filed a stolen vehicle report. The car is mine, after all." Huh? We're already divorced. Now, Michael is essentially driving around in a car that belongs to someone else. It's only natural that a theft report was filed. He probably never imagined such a scenario. Bella then confronted Michael, piling on the pressure.
"Why did you leave us, Dad? Why did you leave us with all that debt? Why?"
Michael sighed wearily. But he said nothing.
"Planning to stay silent? If so, I can have you arrested. You know you've committed a crime by using my name without permission, right?" With that, Michael started to open up bit by bit.
The woman's name is Linda Carter. Michael had started working at a new company where Linda had recently been hired. They got to know each other at a welcome party and subsequently entered into a relationship. About 3 months ago, Linda became pregnant with his child. Indeed, Linda's belly was noticeably rounded.
"So, you abandoned us for her."
Abandoned is such a harsh word. But it's true that you left us. Suddenly, Elizabeth jumped into the conversation, causing Michael to look bewildered. Watching this unfold, Elizabeth pushed forward. Then, Elizabeth started lecturing Michael about his past actions. Saddling me with his debt, his attitude towards his family, quitting jobs frequently, and his quick temper. It was unclear whether Michael was feeling remorseful or not as he kept his head down in silence. Linda seemed irritated by Michael's silence. I also asked about the reason for the debt, but he wouldn't say anything. Impatient with the silence, Linda blurted out a shocking truth. "He took out loans in your name to buy me loads of designer goods. It was really the best." The result of Michael buying things for Linda was a debt of $600,000. What could he have possibly bought? From the looks of it, he must have purchased several items worth millions of yen each. It was utterly ridiculous. However, what caught my attention was Linda revealing the reason for the debt. If she was in on it with Michael, divulging this would put her at a disadvantage. As I pondered this, Bella asked Linda a question. "Hey, your belly is pretty big. Is it a baby? When is it due?" "In about 3 more months, I guess." "Due in 3 months? But that doesn't add up. If she got pregnant 3 months ago, there's still a long way to go until the birth." Elizabeth seemed to have thought the same, pressing Linda further. "Is that child really Michael's? It can't be, right? It's impossible for the baby to be born in 3 months. Whose child is it?" Elizabeth was direct and to the point, much to my surprise. Linda appeared ready to spill everything. "Yeah, it's not Michael's child. I thought about hiding it, but it seemed like more trouble than it was worth, so I just let it out." "You revealed the debt issue too?" "Yes, I guess Michael, you are of no use to me anymore," she said with a vulgar laugh. Being in this hellish situation made me feel sick. Michael looked at Linda incredulously, as if he couldn't believe what he was hearing.
"What do you mean by that?"
"Just what I said." As Michael and Linda started arguing, the already dreadful atmosphere got even worse. But Elizabeth broke the tension. "We'll call the police now."
"What? Why?" "You both don't seem to listen, and seem to forget, using Emily's name for loans is a crime. Plus, driving around a car without permission. After all, Emily and Michael are strangers now."
With that, Elizabeth instructed me to call the police. Despite Michael and Linda's frantic attempts to stop me, I continued with the call. Soon, the flashing lights of a police car appeared. This was the moment to finally hold them accountable. For the debts and the car, everything needed to be settled. I felt a sense of relief wash over me. Following these events, Michael and Linda faced legal repercussions. They didn't end up in prison but were ordered to pay me compensation for damages, cover the debt, and provide child support. Despite their pleas through lawyers for a reduction, the final judgment was not in their favor, especially since Bella had recorded their conversation in the car, which served as evidence. I wondered why Bella had recorded them. Upon asking, she mentioned that she got the idea from a drama she was watching with Elizabeth, where a conversation was secretly recorded. I couldn't help but admire Bella's smart thinking, while also wondering what kind of dramas Elizabeth was showing her. Now, Bella and I were staying with Elizabeth. Our homes weren't far apart, so Bella's schooling was unaffected. Thankfully, the car was returned, and Michael was dealing with the debt. If only Michael hadn't made such reckless decisions, he wouldn't have found himself in this debt crisis. Without a doubt, none of this would have been possible without Elizabeth and Bella. I'm resolved to work hard every day, living happily with the two of them.
Hola, suscríbete a Historias Vitales para no perderte nuevas historias. Mi esposa había estado trabajando en su proyecto especial durante 4 meses ahora. No era su proyecto personal, pero ella era la persona principal y responsable de su éxito. El proyecto estaba diseñado para salvar a su empresa, Bixler Enterprises. Los últimos 4 meses habían sido difíciles porque se vio obligada a trabajar duro. Era importante tanto para ella como para la empresa. Había una buena posibilidad de que Bixler Enterprises quebrara si el proyecto no se completaba. Sarah tenía una licenciatura de Albrecht y un MBA de Wharton. Era la más inteligente de la familia. Yo empecé a trabajar como mecánico de autos justo después de la secundaria y después de 21 años seguía siendo mecánico de autos. No me importaba porque me gustaba el trabajo y pagaba bien. Era suficiente para pagar la universidad de Sarah y criar a 2 hijos. No vivíamos lujosamente, pero estábamos bien. Los niños ya se habían mudado, y las cosas iban bastante bien con nuestros ingresos. Sarah quedó embarazada 3 meses después de casarnos a la edad de 18 años. Durante los primeros años de nuestro matrimonio, vivimos con mis padres. Ellos tenían una gran casa vacía ya que 4 de mis hermanos se habían mudado. Eso significaba que teníamos una niñera mientras Sarah completaba sus primeros años de universidad. Debido a 2 embarazos, la carrera de 4 años le llevó 6 años completarla. Fue difícil, pero lo logró. Siempre tuve trabajo y nunca me faltó trabajo extra si lo necesitaba. Después de que Sarah se graduó de Wharton, alquilamos nuestro propio lugar. Tuvo ofertas de trabajo de varias empresas grandes, pero todas requerían que nos mudáramos. A mí no me importaba, pero Sarah quería quedarse cerca de casa. Por eso decidió trabajar en Bixler Enterprises. Pagaba bien, pero lo más importante, le daba responsabilidad y la oportunidad de avanzar. Sarah era una empleada trabajadora y dedicada. La presentación es el jueves en el Hotel Thyssen en Filadelfia. Tomé unos días libres en el trabajo para ayudarla según fuera necesario. Al final, todo lo que logré fue hacerle algo de comer cuando llegaba a casa. No sabía nada sobre su trabajo, ni tampoco quería saber, los negocios corporativos de alto nivel me aburrían. Empresarios de Europa, Asia y América del Sur venían aquí, la empresa pagaba sus boletos de avión y proporcionaba habitaciones en el Hotel Thyssen mientras estaban aquí. Era caro como el infierno, y por algunas cosas que Sarah había dicho, la empresa estaba sobreestimando sus finanzas. Su presentación era importante para ella, para la empresa y para más de 200 empleados. Hasta el martes por la noche, todo iba bien. Sarah llegó a casa con un traje nuevo, un traje gris con una blusa blanca. Desplegó todo lo que necesitaba en la cama de la habitación de invitados. Cuando se trataba de la limpieza de la casa, ella era normal, pero cuando se trataba del trabajo, era meticulosa. No entendía por qué necesitaba sacar su ropa interior de lujo, pero no dije nada. Además de su traje para la presentación, tenía varios vestidos de cóctel lindos para eventos sociales antes y después del evento. Siempre había evitado tales eventos, pero me sentía obligado a ir con ella si ella quería que lo hiciera. Me agradeció la oferta, pero dijo que no era necesario. Todos los materiales y equipos que necesitaba estaban guardados ordenadamente en el maletero de su Volvo. Antes de salir del trabajo, ella misma conducía el coche para asegurarse de que todo estuviera en perfectas condiciones. Tenía todo el día miércoles para prepararse y toda la noche del miércoles para socializar con sus invitados. Sara era tan buena en lo que hacía que sentía que habría sido mejor si simplemente me hubiera mantenido alejado de ella. Finalmente, había terminado. Lo había revisado y vuelto a revisar todo. Todo lo que necesitaba ahora era una ducha caliente y una buena noche de sueño. Supongo que mi error fue que empecé a revisar sus cosas después de que Sara comenzara a ducharse. Pensé que estaba ayudando, pero resultó ser lo contrario. Estaba moviendo cosas en la cama cuando un pequeño sobre blanco cayó del bolsillo lateral de su bolso de maquillaje. Una carta de una farmacia, pero no del tipo que solemos usar. Dentro había 10 pastillas. No tenía idea de qué era, y las instrucciones eran confusas. Si es necesario, tomar una pastilla y luego una segunda pastilla 12 horas después. Pensé que podría ser algo que ella había conseguido para la ansiedad o los nervios, pero las instrucciones no tenían sentido. La receta estaba escrita a su nombre el lunes. Volví a poner el sobre en su lugar mientras ella terminaba de ducharse. Decidí que quería saber más sobre antes de contarle sobre ello. Por supuesto, si lo mencionaba, significaría que estaba revisando sus cosas. Odio los dilemas. Mientras Sara se preparaba para dormir, fui a nuestro ordenador doméstico y busqué. 10 minutos después, me uní a mi esposa bajo las sábanas. Pasé toda la noche despierto, preguntándome por qué mi esposa había recogido una receta para la píldora del día después, especialmente después de que me hicieran una vasectomía hace 10 años. A la mañana siguiente, me levanté temprano, pero no estaba descansado. Di un largo paseo, esperando que despejara mi mente. Me dirigí hacia casa con reticencia, temiendo lo que podría hacer o decir cuando llegara allí. Mi hijo Joe se unió a la Marina después de la escuela secundaria y estaba en su primer año en San Diego. Nuestra hija Gloria se casó con su amor de la infancia el año pasado y acababa de mudarse a Dallas. Eso dejaba solo a Sara y a mí. Echaba de menos a los niños, pero esperaba envejecer con mi esposa. Ella era la única mujer que me había interesado, y ahora todo estaba. Si Sara estaba teniendo una aventura, lo ocultaba bien. Por supuesto, nunca la vigilé. Nunca miré sus correos electrónicos o llamadas telefónicas. No tenía razones para hacerlo. No tenía forma de saber qué estaba haciendo en el trabajo o después del trabajo. Confiaba en ella completamente. Ion, ¿dónde demonios has estado? ¿Quieres huevos o algo? No, solo café. No me sentía con muchas ganas de hablar. ¿Qué pasa, cariño? Solo son 3 días. Puedes venir si quieres, pero te aburrirás como una ostra. No, realmente no quiero ir, pero odio dejarte sola. Me preocupo cuando no estás aquí. Es muy dulce, querido, pero estará bien. No voy a salir del hotel en todo este tiempo. Pasaré la mayor parte del día asegurándome de que la sala de conferencias esté lista, y esta noche tendré una agradable charla con nuestros posibles clientes. Mañana, probablemente ni siquiera tendré la oportunidad de ir al baño. Llegaré a casa lo más temprano posible el viernes. Te prometo un gran fin de semana si sabes a lo que me refiero. Todo eso suena bien, pero no puedes culparme por preocuparme. Soy un mecánico de autos, y tengo una esposa hermosa y exitosa. A veces tengo la sensación de que estás menos interesada en mejorar nuestra situación familiar que en avanzar en tu carrera. Detente, maldita sea, Ion. Siempre he respetado lo que haces para ganarte la vida y nunca he insinuado lo contrario. Criaste a 2 grandes niños y me pusiste a través de la universidad. Eres un gran esposo, un gran padre y un buen proveedor, y nunca olvides eso. Terminé mi café mientras ella recogía la mesa. ¿Quieres que te llame? No, no es una buena idea. Tendré el móvil apagado, y voy a apagar el teléfono de la habitación por la noche para poder dormir. Te llamaré siempre que pueda. La ayudé a cargar el coche, era tan meticulosa con eso como con todo lo demás. Trabajando, le llevaría 3 horas llegar al hotel Dicen. Me quedé en el porche y la vi marcharse. No me molesté en preguntarle por las pastillas. Pasé el resto de la mañana en el porche. No recuerdo haberme preocupado tanto como ahora. Me sentía pequeño e insignificante. Me sentía fuera de mi liga. Era un tipo de pueblo con un trabajo mediocre y una esposa exitosa. Era una combinación equivocada. Debería haberlo notado antes. Me sentía estúpido. El mejor traje que tenía era una chaqueta azul y un par de pantalones. Al menos tenía algunas corbatas, aunque tenían 10 años de antigüedad. Acababa de terminar de vestirme cuando sonó el teléfono fijo. Oye, cariño, solo quería avisarte de que llegué bien. ¿Tuviste un buen viaje? Supongo que el tráfico no estaba demasiado denso. Estuvo bien. Te llamaré esta noche. Ahora tengo que irme. Estoy en la habitación 714, Sara. Puedo estar en casa de mis padres o en la de mis hermanos esta noche si quieres llamarme a mi móvil. De acuerdo. Suena el teléfono móvil. Te quiero, tengo que irme. Me tomé mi tiempo para llegar a Filadelfia. No fui directo al Dicen, primero me detuve y compré un filete con queso. Prometí hacer una larga noche. No estaba seguro de qué iba a hacer. Estacioné en el garaje del hotel y simplemente esperé. Tarde o temprano, tenía que entrar en el hotel. Simplemente no podía decidir cuándo hacerlo. El sonido de mi teléfono celular me ayudó a tomar mi decisión. Ion, solo quería avisarte de que todo se ha arreglado. Ahora voy a bajar para encontrarme con algunas personas y cenar. No olvidaste nada, ¿verdad? No, todo está bien. Tengo todo en mi habitación para mañana. ¿Necesitas algo? No, Ion, relájate. Voy a apagar mi teléfono. Te llamaré mañana por la mañana. ¿De acuerdo? Ríe, diviértete. No es divertido, Ion, es trabajo. No parecía estar demasiado fuera de lugar. El vestíbulo, el restaurante y las salas de conferencias estaban llenos de gente, así que pude pasar desapercibido. Había un folleto pequeño y bonito que mostraba el diseño de todas las habitaciones del hotel. Me paseé por las diferentes habitaciones y me detuve en las paredes, mirando alrededor entre la multitud. No tenía ni idea de qué haría si Sara me veía. Lo averiguaría si y cuando eso sucediera. Encontré un tablero de eventos que enumeraba todas las habitaciones que estaban siendo utilizadas por los diversos grupos. Bixler Enterprises no tenía habitaciones disponibles para el miércoles por la noche. Esto me pareció interesante. Sara había dicho que no iba a salir del hotel, pero ahora no estaba tan seguro de eso. Había 3 comedores, familiar, informal y de alta cocina. A Sara no le gustaba mucho cenar con niños, así que fui primero al comedor informal. Solo me llevó 5 minutos asegurarme de que no estaba allí. Tuve mejor suerte en el salón gourmet, era una acogedora mesita encajada en la esquina, el tipo de mesa que la gente reserva para tener un encuentro privado. Sara llevaba un vestido de cóctel negro con un escote pronunciado y perlas, se veía elegante y su acompañante parecía apreciarlo. Conocía a algunas personas con las que trabajaba Sara, y él no era una de ellas. Me resultaba familiar, pero no había forma de que pudiera recordarlo. Había muchas sillas libres, así que no tuve problemas para cruzar la sala. Había velas y pequeños candelabros de cristal en las mesas. Apagué la mía y le dije al camarero que me molestaba por el glaucoma. Pedí el plato de pollo de siempre y me acomodé. El camarero me sirvió el café por tercera vez. Disculpe, el tipo en la mesa de enfrente me parece muy familiar. ¿Sabes quién es? Sí, ese es Malcolm Eugene Foote. Es miembro del Consejo Municipal, se espera que se postule para el Congreso en los próximos años. ¿Es esa su esposa con él? Es muy bonita. No, esta es la primera vez que la veo. Siempre usa esa mesa para señoras especiales, si me entiende. Simplemente le sonreí y pedí la cuenta. Nunca había visto a Sara tan sensual con un hombre antes. Parecía captar cada palabra que decía, como si fuera Dios o algo así. No estaban haciendo nada inapropiado, pero tampoco era platónico ni profesional. Cuando me fui, estaban terminando su segunda botella de vino. Ahora entendía por qué se había llevado su lencería elegante. Me acomodé en una esquina del vestíbulo para que no me vieran. 10 minutos después, salieron del restaurante. Ella le tomaba la mano mientras caminaban por el vestíbulo hacia el ascensor. Observé cuidadosamente los indicadores de piso. Que el ascensor se detuviera en el tercer piso era una buena señal, significaba que no lo había llevado a su habitación. Era una mala señal cuando el ascensor no llegaba al séptimo piso, significaba que ella fue a su habitación. Por si acaso me equivocaba en algo, me senté en el vestíbulo y observé el ascensor durante 1 hora. La gente entraba y salía, pero Sara no estaba entre ellos. Saqué mi maleta vacía del coche y me dirigí al mostrador de recepción. Aunque podía demostrar que era su esposo, me costó trabajo conseguir una tarjeta llave. Se dieron después de llamar a la habitación, pero nadie respondió. Finalmente, estaba en camino a la habitación 714 con la tarjeta llave. Ni siquiera encendí las luces al principio, simplemente me senté en la oscuridad de la habitación durante más de 1 hora. No fue difícil asegurarme de que no regresara a la habitación. Primero, empacé todas sus ropas y pertenencias personales. No dejé nada atrás. Revisé el paquete de Preven, todavía quedaban 10 pastillas en el tocador. De manera muy ordenada, estaban todos los artículos que necesitaría para su presentación al día siguiente. Comencé a llenar la maleta. Había 24 carpetas promocionales especialmente encuadernadas y otras 20 carpetas regulares, todas ellas fueron a la maleta. Un proyector digital fue lo siguiente, seguido de una computadora portátil. Tomé su bolso y su celular, que había dejado en la habitación. Todo lo que tenía consigo era un bolso de mano y probablemente un tubo de lápiz labial. Di una vuelta por la habitación tan cuidadosamente como lo hizo ella para asegurarme de no perder nada. Una vez satisfecho, dejé las llaves del coche y mi anillo de bodas en el tocador. Aparte de esos 2 objetos, la habitación estaba completamente vacía. El ascensor se dirigió directamente al estacionamiento, no tuve problemas para llevar 2 maletas, y 20 minutos después, estaba en la autopista rumbo al norte. Pasaban las 3 de la madrugada, no tenía idea de que había pasado tanto tiempo. 1 hora o 2 después, sonó mi teléfono celular, la identificación de llamadas mostraba el número del listen. ¿Ion? Sí, ¿dónde estás? Estaré en casa pronto. Eso fue todo lo que dije. Hubo silencio en el otro extremo de la línea. Los vendedores tienen un viejo dicho, el primero que habla pierde. Pareció una eternidad antes de que ella hablara. Ion, lo siento. No preguntó nada y simplemente colgó. Apagué mi teléfono, era obvio que había regresado a su habitación. Más tarde ese día, tenía que dar una presentación que salvaría a su empresa y le daría un ascenso. Metí las maletas en el desván del garaje. Sara nunca iba allí y nunca pensó en buscar algo allí. Por supuesto, en este punto, estoy bastante seguro de que no importaba. Primero, recogí todas mis ropas y pertenencias personales. La mayoría de los hombres tienen sus propias herramientas, generalmente es un requisito para el trabajo. Pasé por la tienda, cargué las mías en el Subaru y recogí mi último cheque de pago. Para entonces, los bancos ya estaban abiertos, no tuve que hacer ninguna manipulación financiera complicada. Simplemente retiré todo el dinero de mis cuentas. Almorcé en Hagerstown, Maryland. Tenía suficiente dinero para vivir durante unos años, pero sabía que estaría buscando trabajo muy pronto. Sarah y yo éramos parecidos en eso de que a ambos nos encantaba trabajar. La voy a extrañar. Pasé un par de horas en las cuevas del Uray y alquilé una habitación cerca de Whitewell. No tenía idea de qué iba a hacer. Era sábado, y me encontré sentado en el acuario de Chattanooga, observando la naturaleza que nunca había visto antes. Pasé unas horas simplemente relajándome y decidí que era un buen lugar para estar. Compré un pase anual para el acuario y, para la hora de la cena, tenía un lugar donde quedarme. Era un remolque móvil en el parque, pero estaba amueblado y era económico. No necesitaba mucho. La primera cosa que haría el lunes por la mañana sería conseguir un trabajo. Un buen hombre de mantenimiento siempre puede conseguir un trabajo, especialmente si está dispuesto a trabajar duro. Podría permanecer discreto hasta que fuera el momento de renovar mi licencia de conducir o las etiquetas del coche, me preocuparé por eso cuando llegue el momento. El domingo por la tarde, llamé a Gloria. Me sentí obligado a informarle sobre lo que estaba sucediendo, pero Sarah ya se lo había contado. Fue bastante franca con Gloria sobre lo que había pasado, dijo que había engañado, que la sorprendí, que me fui y que ella perdió su trabajo. Me sentí mal porque ella perdió su trabajo, pero ese era el precio que tenía que pagar. Le pedí a Gloria que le dijera a Josh lo que estaba sucediendo la próxima vez que hablara con él. También le dije que la llamaría aproximadamente una vez al mes para verificar cómo iban las cosas. No le dije dónde estaba. Para el mediodía del día siguiente, tenía un trabajo. En realidad, estaba a poca distancia del parque de remolques, con el Waffle House a mitad de camino. ¿Qué más podría querer un hombre? No sé cómo manejaron el papeleo, pero me estaban pagando $20 por hora sin hacer preguntas. Estaba feliz, y ellos también. Ni siquiera tendría que tocar el dinero que traje conmigo. Unos 2 meses después, Gloria me informó que Sarah se había mudado de la casa y estaba viviendo con sus padres. Gloria no sabía nada más, pero estaba feliz de que estuviera estable y le estuviera yendo bien. Josh me llamó desde San Diego solo para informarme que iba a hacer un crucero. Era técnico en aviónica en un portaaviones, intentó explicar qué hacía exactamente, pero estaba más allá de mi comprensión. Nunca supe mucho sobre cosas técnicas. Ambos tuvieron cuidado de no decir nada malo sobre su madre, aprecié eso. Después de eso, todo siguió como siempre. Comencé a hablar con Gloria al menos semanalmente, Josh y yo comenzamos a enviar correos electrónicos regularmente. Gloria hablaba regularmente con Sarah, pero decía muy poco sobre lo que estaba haciendo o dónde estaba. Nunca presenté la solicitud de divorcio, y parece que Sarah tampoco lo hizo. Tengo una licencia de conducir de Tennessee y las etiquetas en el Subaru. Comencé a frecuentar un bar local un par de veces al mes y tuve encuentros casuales, 2 mujeres se alternaban como mis compañeras nocturnas regulares. No buscaban compromisos, y yo tampoco, parecía funcionar bien para todos nosotros. La vida era buena. Eso fue hace mucho tiempo, y gradualmente olvidé a Sarah. Con el tiempo, el Subaru comenzó a darme problemas, había olvidado cuánto tiempo había pasado. Tenía más de 200,000 millas. Estaba reflexionando sobre esto con una jarra de cerveza un día cuando me di cuenta de que habían pasado casi 5 años desde que me fui de casa. Mantuve un contacto cercano con ambos hijos, Gloria ya tenía 2 hijos propios en este momento y quería que los visitara. Josh casi se casó con una mujer tailandesa, pero en el último momento, se negó. Por lo general, trabajaba 6 días a la semana y usaba el domingo para recuperarme del sábado por la noche, no había ninguna buena razón para que alguien llamara a la puerta de mi remolque a las 6 de la mañana de un viernes. Su grosería fue recompensada por un hombre medio desnudo abriendo la puerta, los calzoncillos del día son repugnantes, y la dama en la puerta, juzgando por la expresión en su rostro, estuvo de acuerdo conmigo. Ella apartó la mirada, pero su compañero no parecía impresionado. Norm habría usado pantalones, pero en un momento como este, los invitados me molestaron. Estamos buscando a John Terrell. No los conozco. Me llamo David Simmons, y esta es mi esposa Mara. Tenemos un problema y esperamos que nos puedas ayudar. Lo siento mucho, no trabajo a altas horas de la noche. Si necesitan algo relacionado con su auto, tendrán que ir a la tienda. Esto provocó varias miradas en blanco y finalmente una respuesta. No tiene nada que ver con tu trabajo, es más un problema personal. ¿Podemos entrar? El interior del remolque lucía desordenado, rara vez tenía invitados, así que rara vez lo limpiaba. Incluso mis novias insistían en que fuéramos a su lugar. Hagan como en su casa, déjenme ponerme los pantalones enseguida. Al entrar en el dormitorio, dejé la puerta abierta solo para mostrarles lo hospitalario que soy. También me puse una camisa. ¿Les gustaría tomar café? Solo tomará unos 10 minutos. Aparté algunas cosas del sofá para que pudieran sentarse, no hubo respuesta a la pregunta del café. Tenemos una hija adoptiva de 4 años y otra de 2 que necesita un trasplante de médula ósea, y esperamos que nos puedas ayudar. Estamos dispuestos a pagarte si es necesario. ¿Con mi médula ósea? No, queremos usarla y estamos dispuestos a compensarte por cualquier inconveniente. Creo que quieren comprarla. Estaba actuando como un listillo, y de repente me di cuenta de ello. Estas personas eran serias, tenían un problema real y estaban buscando ayuda. Lo siento mucho, no quise interrumpir. Por favor, continúen. Nuestra mejor oportunidad de encontrar un donante es un familiar cercano. Eres nuestra mejor esperanza. Mira esto. No quiero ser un grosero, pero creo que se equivocaron de persona. ¿Cuándo nació su hija? Cumplirá 5 años en julio. Marche Simmons habló por primera vez, y sonó sincera. Odio ser el portador de malas noticias, pero me hice una vasectomía hace 15 años. No hay forma de que pueda ser su padre. ¿Por qué tu nombre estaba en el certificado de nacimiento? No puedo responder eso, tal vez deberían preguntarle a su madre. Esa afirmación fue recibida con silencio. Sentí pena por estas personas, pero no sabía cómo ayudarles. ¿Cuál es el nombre de la madre? Sarah Lise Terrell. No encontraba las palabras. Tal vez no debería haber tomado esas malditas pastillas de ella, por supuesto, entonces esas personas no tendrían una hija en absoluto. Todo lo que pensaba que había superado el dolor, y aquí está de nuevo, viejos recuerdos de mi esposa teniendo relaciones sexuales con ese maldito político de Filadelfia. Estaba empezando a olvidarlo todo, y ahora estaba de vuelta. Maldita sea. Ahora entiendo y pido disculpas por mi grosería e insensibilidad. Haré todo lo que esté en mi poder para ayudarles. En primer lugar, porque no puede Sara hacerse un trasplante de médula ósea. Médicamente, no puede. ¿Por qué no? Es madre, tiene que ser una donante adecuada. Ella es una donante adecuada, pero está demasiado enferma. Los médicos se negaron siquiera a considerar utilizarla. ¿Enferma de qué? Está muriendo de insuficiencia hepática. Le quedan menos de 6 meses de vida. Esto no tiene sentido. Siempre ha estado perfectamente sana. Además, no creo que un hígado enfermo le impida donar médula ósea. El hospital no aceptará su firma en el formulario de consentimiento. ¿Estás diciendo que hay algo mal en su cabeza? Ambos me miraron en silencio, sabían la respuesta, pero no querían decirlo. En ese momento, no quería que se sintieran aún más incómodos. Hace 10 minutos, no me importaban, pero ahora sentía que tenía que protegerlos y ayudarlos. ¿Cómo sucedió esto? ¿Podría alguno de mis hijos ayudar? Quizás, pero pensamos que eras nuestra mejor esperanza. ¿Por qué no van tras su padre, su verdadero padre? Pensamos que eras tú. No tenemos ni idea de quién más podría ser. Sara no nos dijo nada sobre otro posible padre. De hecho, ella no estaba en condiciones de explicar nada, agregó Mara. Obtuvimos la mayoría de nuestra información de la agencia de adopción. Tuve que preparar café y hacer pis, permítanme un momento. Dejé a mis invitados sentados mientras preparaba el café. Solo tomó unos minutos. Mientras se preparaba, fui al baño, algo que necesitaba hacer urgentemente. Traté de ser discreto, ya había avergonzado lo suficiente a Mara. ¿Dónde viven? En Westchester, Pensilvania. Les haré una oferta. Si les digo quién es el verdadero padre de su hija, deben prometerme que lo perseguirán sin descanso hasta obtener lo que desean. ¿De qué estás hablando? El padre de su hija es un político prominente en Pensilvania. Por supuesto, negará todo y probablemente les proporcionará documentos legales para detener sus esfuerzos. Si acuerdan presionar lo suficiente para que él admita que la niña es suya, podrán avergonzarlo y obligarlo a hacerse un trasplante de médula ósea. Eso es lo que quieren, ¿verdad? Sí, claro, pero ¿cómo hacemos eso? No lo sé. Soy mecánico. Trabajo con metal para ganarme la vida. Creo que la mejor manera sería utilizar la televisión, la radio y los periódicos. Los políticos harán cualquier cosa para evitar una mala publicidad. ¿Tienen amigos que puedan ayudar? Bueno, ahora ambos estaban sonriendo. Debo haber dicho algo que les dio esperanza. Creo que podemos hacer esto. ¿Quién demonios es él? Malcolm Eugene Foote. Se postula para el Senado de los Estados Unidos. Apuesto a que hará cualquier cosa para evitar una mala publicidad. El café estaba listo, pero David y Marshall no podían esperar para llegar a casa. Antes de irse, les dije cómo ponerse en contacto con Gloria y Josh en caso de que los necesitaran. Estaba seguro de que ayudarían. También les pedí que me dijeran dónde estaba Sara. Probablemente estaría en Pensacola antes de que ellos regresaran a Westchester. Me corté el pelo y compré una camisa nueva. Sara era una tramposa que arruinó mi vida, pero aún así quería lucir bien cuando la viera. Era otro remolque, pero esta vez era un bonito doble nuevo. Allí estaba su Volvo con una llanta desinflada y un parabrisas roto. La mujer que abrió la puerta no era Sara, parecía que la habían empapado fuerte y la habían dejado empapada. Tenía al menos 45, tal vez 50, y debió haber tenido una vida difícil. La falta de maquillaje no ayudaba y simplemente se veía horrible. No tuve la oportunidad de abrir la boca. Caray, si no es John Terrell. Nunca esperé verte aquí. Tuve que usar la vieja línea, me estás poniendo en desventaja. Sherry Hart. Pasa, entra. ¿Quieres una cerveza? No, pero gracias. Estoy aquí para ver a Sara. Sherry cruzó la habitación y se detuvo en el buffet del comedor. Aquí está, John. Mírala todo lo que quieras. Su mano señalaba una urna de latón que estaba en el centro del buffet vacío. Supongo que llegué demasiado tarde. No me moví, solo me quedé mirando el contenedor frente a mí. ¿Puedo tomar una cerveza ahora? Sara se mudó a Pensacola después de dar a su bebé en adopción. Compró el remolque con el dinero que recibió de Bixler Enterprises después de que la despidieron. Tenía una participación en las ganancias, 401k, y vacaciones y días de enfermedad. Eventualmente, consiguió un trabajo en una fábrica local de prendas de vestir donde trabajaba en el departamento de envíos. Allí fue donde conoció a Sherry. Sherry alquilaba una habitación de Sara. Cada centavo que Sara ganaba iba para el alcohol. Empezó con vino y gradualmente pasó a bebidas más fuertes, las más baratas. Eventualmente, perdió su trabajo debido a su alcoholismo y se vio obligada a usar sus ahorros. Nunca salió con nadie ni salió a ningún lado. Sherry se quedó con ella, pagó sus servicios públicos y compró alimentos que Sara no comía. Le llevó más de 3 años quitarse la vida. Increíblemente, ella tenía un testamento y me dejó un doble remolque y un Volvo. Sherry explicó que Sarah estaba tan angustiada por lo que había hecho que simplemente se rindió. No intentó evitar el embarazo ni siquiera terminarlo. La adopción se había arreglado meses antes de que naciera el bebé. Nunca volvió a trabajar, excepto en los trabajos clandestinos que hacía mal. Sherry dijo que Sarah no parecía tener ambición ni propósito en la vida. Sarah hablaba mucho de mí pero tenía miedo de intentar contactarme. Gloria le dio mi número, pero nunca me llamó. Era como si su aventura de una noche la hubiera lastimado más a ella que a mí. Estuve allí durante 2 semanas y luego vendí el remolque de Sherry por $1 y obtuve $3,000 por el Volvo. 2 días después, estaba en Westchester visitando a mis nuevos amigos David y Marche. Malcolm Eugene Foot resistió al principio, pero David y Marche lo presionaron hasta que cedió. Insistió en pruebas de ADN, que demostraron que era el padre. Para salvar la cara, más o menos lo obligaron a someterse a un trasplante de médula ósea, que fue exitoso. La carrera política y la vida familiar de Malcolm no dejaron una impresión favorable. Su caída en las encuestas fue tan rápida que el partido lo reemplazó por otro candidato unos meses antes de las elecciones. Su esposa solicitó el divorcio y fue muy pública al respecto. Sarah y yo estamos viajando ahora a Dallas para ver a Gloria y a mis nietos. No sé cuánto tiempo mantendré a Sarah conmigo, probablemente hasta que tenga a alguien.